Amanda knelt in the center, clutching a rosary and praying for deliverance. As the priest chanted, her late husband's ghost appeared, more menacing than ever. "You cannot cleanse the guilt from your soul," he intoned, his voice resonating with a chilling finality. "You will never find peace." The villagers gasped, some crossing themselves in fear. The priest continued his chants, beads of sweat forming on his brow, but it was clear the ritual was failing. Obinna's ghostly form loomed larger, his presence overwhelming. In a final act of defiance, her late husband's ghost rushed at Amanda, passing through her like an icy wind. She screamed, the cold seeping into her very bones. The villagers watched in horror as Amanda collapsed, writhing on the ground. In the tranquil village of Bello, nestled in a valley surrounded by rolling hills and vibrant fields, lived a young farmer named Obinna and his beautiful wife, Amanda. He was known throughout the village for his unwavering love and devotion to his wife. From the moment they married, his sole purpose in life became to provide her with the luxurious life she had always dreamed of. Each day, he will rise before the sun, his hands already rough and calloused from endless toil. He worked tirelessly, plowing fields, planting seeds, and harvesting crops under the scorching sun. The sweat that drenched his brow and the blisters that marred his hands were testaments to his determination and love for his wife. He dreamed of giving Amanda the finest clothes, a grand home, and the comforts that the wealthier men in the city could provide. But the relentless labor took a toll on Obinna's health. He often fell sick, his body weakened by the lack of rest and nourishment. His friends and neighbors in the village pitied him, watching with heavy hearts as he pushed himself to the brink. They admired his dedication but worried about his well-being. The village women, in particular, saw the sacrifice he made for Amanda and wished they could ease his burden. His wife, however, was indifferent to her husband's suffering. Despite Obinna's efforts to make her happy, she seemed perpetually dissatisfied. She watched him toil from dawn till dusk without a trace of gratitude or concern. Instead, she berated him, blaming him for destroying the luxurious life she had envisioned for herself. She frequently reminded him of her disappointment, her words cutting deeper than any physical pain he endured. "You've ruined everything," she would say, her voice dripping with disdain. "I could have married a rich man from the city and lived in comfort. But here I am, stuck in this miserable village because of you." Her harsh words and cold demeanor crushed her husband's spirit, making him feel worthless. Yet, he continued to labor tirelessly, driven by a faint hope that one day she might see his love for what it truly was. One stormy night, the rain pounded against the roof of their small house. Her husband had fallen ill again, his body weakened from relentless work and little rest. He lay in bed, shivering and feverish. Amanda stood over him, her frustration boiling over. "This is pathetic," she muttered. "You're always sick, always weak. How am I supposed to have a decent life with a husband who can't even stay healthy?" Her husband, struggling to speak through his fever, looked up at her with pleading eyes. "Amanda, I'm doing my best. Your best isn't good enough," she shouted, her voice breaking. "I could have married a rich man from the city and lived in luxury. Instead, I'm stuck here, nursing a husband who's too frail to provide for me." Her words cut deeper than any physical pain he had endured. Her husband turned his face away, tears mingling with the sweat on his brow, his spirit crushed under the weight of her relentless scorn. The villagers, who witnessed Amanda's cruelty, were appalled by her behavior. They couldn't understand how she could be so heartless towards a man who gave everything for her. But despite Amanda's scorn, the other women in Bello admired Obinna's dedication to his family. They saw in him the epitome of love and sacrifice. Many wished they could have a husband as devoted as him, though none of them would treat him as poorly as Amanda did. They often whispered among themselves, lamenting how Amanda was neglectful of the love the gods had blessed her with. As years passed, Amanda's frustration with her life in Bello grew more intense with each passing day, and her outbursts became more frequent and severe. One scorching afternoon, her husband returned home later than usual, exhausted from repairing a broken fence on their farm. He had hoped to find some solace and a brief respite, but as he entered their modest home, his wife was waiting, her eyes blazing with anger. "Where have you been?" she snapped, her voice echoing through the small room. "The city merchants were here today, and I missed my chance to buy the silk dress I've been wanting. All because you were too busy playing farmer." Her husband tried to explain, his voice weary. "I had to fix the fence, Amanda. Without it, the goats would have gotten loose and destroyed our crops." Amanda scoffed, her disdain palpable. Crops, goats, fences, this is all meaningless. I'm tired of this wretched life. I deserve better. Another day, during the village's annual festival, the air was filled with laughter and music. Families gathered to celebrate, dressed in their finest clothes. Amanda watched enviously as the wealthier women from neighboring villages arrived in elegant dresses and sparkling jewelry. She felt a pang of resentment, and her mood darkened. As the evening wore on, she found her husband, who had been helping set up the festival, and unleashed her fury. "Look at them," she hissed, gesturing towards the well-dressed guests. "They have everything I've ever wanted, and I have nothing. Why couldn't you have been more ambitious? Why did I marry someone who can't give me the life I deserve?" Her husband's face fell, the joy of the festival draining from him. He reached out to comfort her, but she pushed his hand away, her expression hard and unforgiving. The villagers, hearing Amanda's cruel words, shook their heads in sorrow. They couldn't fathom how she could be so blind to Obinna's unwavering love and sacrifice. They whispered among themselves, lamenting the harsh reality that despite his tireless efforts, Obinna's life was marred by the one person he cherished the most. After watching the feast, Amanda and Obinna retired to their modest hut. The lively music and laughter from the village celebration still echoed in their ears, but Amanda's thoughts were far from joyous. She had spent the evening seething with envy, watching the wealthier women flaunt their elegant dresses and sparkling jewelry. The sight had only deepened her resentment towards her humble life with her husband. That night, Amanda refused to offer her husband any food, her voice cold and unyielding. "A man like you doesn't deserve to eat," she declared, her words stinging more than any physical blow. Obinna, worn out from the long tiring day, went to bed with an empty stomach. As he lay there, his heart heavy with sadness, he couldn't understand why his love and hard work were never enough for his wife. The next morning, his wife woke him up earlier than usual. The sky was still dark, the air cool with the promise of dawn. Her voice was sharp as she said, "We need to talk." Her husband, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, looked at her with concern. "What is it, Amanda?" "We can't keep living like this," she began, her tone urgent. "You need to go to the city and make money. Build us a proper house. Once you've done that, I'll join you." The shock on her husband's face was palpable. He couldn't believe the lengths his wife would go for riches. "But I don't want to leave you alone in the village," he said softly. "You know how much the villagers despise you." Amanda's eyes flashed with anger. "You're being inconsiderate of our family's state, Obinna. Instead of thanking me for my brilliant suggestion, you're making excuses." Her husband tried to explain his concerns, but she immediately shot him down with bitter words, belittling him for his lack of ambition. "You're nothing but a failure. If you truly loved me, you'd do whatever it takes to give me the life I deserve." Her harsh words cut deep, but he still hesitated. He knew that life in the city would be harsh and unforgiving, and he worried about leaving his wife behind. But then, Amanda played her final card. She took a deep breath, her voice trembling with feigned emotion. "I'm pregnant." The words hit him like a bolt of lightning. For 5 years, he had longed for a child, but Amanda had always refused. Now, hearing her say she was pregnant, tears of joy welled up in his eyes. "Amanda, are you sure?" he asked, his voice breaking. She nodded, her tears flowing freely. "Yes, Obi. That's why you need to go to the city. We need to provide for our baby." Her husband, overcome with emotion, pleaded with her to calm down. "I'll go, Amanda. I'll do whatever it takes for our family. Just promise me you'll take care of yourself and our baby." Amanda smiled maliciously, knowing her plan had succeeded. "Of course, just promise me you'll come back with enough money to build us a new life." The next morning, he set out for the city, his heart heavy with the thought of leaving his beloved village and his wife. He carried only a small bag of belongings, determined to find work and earn enough money to fulfill Amanda's dreams. Life in the city was harsh, just as he had feared. The noise, the crowds, and the relentless pace were overwhelming for a simple village farmer. But he pushed himself to the limit, taking on any job he could find. He worked in construction, toiled in factories, and even swept the streets, saving every penny he earned. Back in Bello, Amanda basked in the attention of the villagers. With Obinna gone, they felt compelled to offer her help and support, even though they despised her behavior. She played the role of the expectant mother, accepting their offerings of food and assistance, all the while feeling smug about her clever manipulation. Months passed, and Obinna's letters to Amanda went unanswered. He wrote of his struggles and his hopes, but her silence only fueled his determination. He imagined her at home, taking care of their unborn child, and it spurred him on to work even harder. More months came and passed with relentless toil for Obinna in the bustling city. Each day, he poured his sweat and strength into labor, driven by the hope of providing for Amanda and their unborn child. Letters from Amanda became his lifeline, each one carrying her words of encouragement and updates on the baby's supposed progress. Her descriptions of the baby's kicks and health filled his heart with joy and motivation, pushing him to work even harder. Unbeknownst to Obinna, Amanda's pregnancy was a fabrication. She had visited her mother in their village, seeking help to avoid becoming pregnant. With the help of strong herbal medicine from her mother, Amanda maintained the facade of pregnancy while she remained comfortably in Bello, away from the hardships of city life she so despised. As Obinna's days blurred into weeks of exhausting labor, his health began to deteriorate. The strain of relentless work, coupled with the stress of providing for his growing family, took a toll on his body. Fatigue settled deep into his bones, and a persistent cough plagued him, but still, he pressed on, driven by love and responsibility. One fateful day, weakened beyond measure, he collapsed at his workplace, and was rushed to a nearby clinic, where the doctors did what they could, but it was too late. Obinna passed away, his body succumbing to the relentless demands he had placed upon it. The news of his death spread swiftly through the city and eventually reached Bello, where his wife received the devastating message. Her reaction was carefully crafted, a performance of grief and devastation that belied the truth. In front of the villagers, she wept profusely, mourning the loss of her beloved husband. Her cries echoed through the village as they hastily prepared for Obinna's burial, a somber affair filled with sorrow and disbelief. But as the villagers observed Amanda's dramatic display of mourning, an undercurrent of anger simmered beneath the surface. They had witnessed Obinna's unwavering dedication and sacrifice for a wife who had treated him with disdain. Amanda's tears seemed hollow, her grief disproportionate to the loss of a husband who had given everything for her happiness. As Obinna was laid to rest, Amanda's mourning was short-lived. Within a week of his death, she was seen parading herself around the village, no longer dressed in mourning clothes but in attire that hinted at her readiness for a new life. She entertained suitors who came calling, offering herself freely and even suggesting to some that she had never truly been married. The villagers watched with a mixture of disbelief and disgust as she shamelessly moved on from her husband's death. News of her swift transition from mourning wife to available bachelorette spread like wildfire through Bello. Whispers of her behavior reached even the most remote corners of the village, tarnishing her reputation irreparably. But Amanda remained undeterred. With a calculated charm, she groomed herself for her next marriage, entertaining suitors who arrived from the city. Among them was a wealthy man who captured her attention, a man who shared her dreams of a lavish lifestyle far removed from the hardships of village life. They spent hours in conversation, discussing their ambitions and desires. She soon realized that this man was everything she had ever dreamed of, a ticket to the opulent life she believed she deserved. As they planned their future together, Amanda's past with Obinna faded into the background, a distant memory overshadowed by the promise of a new beginning filled with wealth and privilege. As the moon rose high in the ink-black sky, casting ghostly shadows across the village of Bello, Amanda lay in fitful sleep, her mind plagued by restless dreams. Suddenly, a chill swept through her room, extinguishing the feeble candle by her bedside. The air thickened with an oppressive presence, and her eyes shot open, her heart hammering in her chest. There, at the foot of her bed, stood Obinna's ghost. His form was translucent, flickering with an eerie light that seemed to emanate from within. His eyes bore into Amanda's with an intensity that froze her blood, his spectral gaze filled with a mix of sorrow and unrelenting fury. Amanda, his voice echoed through the stillness, a haunting whisper that seemed to come from the depths of the grave itself. "You thought you could forget me?" Amanda recoiled in terror, her breath catching in her throat. "Obinna, please," she whimpered, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry, you didn't mean to betray me," his ghost interrupted, his voice rising to a chilling crescendo. "You didn't mean to forsake the love I gave you." Tears streamed down Amanda's face as she cowered beneath the weight of his spectral presence. "Forgive me," she pleaded, her voice barely a whisper. "I beg you, forgive me. You tore my heart in life," he intoned, his voice resonating with a deep, unearthly echo. Now, I will haunt you for eternity." With those words, his ghost vanished into the night, leaving Amanda trembling and alone in the cold embrace of her haunted room. But this was only the beginning. Days passed, yet Amanda found no respite from her late husband's vengeful spirit. In broad daylight, as she went about her daily routines in the bustling market square, whispers followed her like shadows. Suddenly, amidst the crowd, she would catch a glimpse of her late husband's ghostly figure, a flicker of movement in the corner of her eye, a spectral presence haunting her every step. "Let me be," she cried out in desperation, drawing concerned glances from the villagers around her. But they saw nothing, only her frantic gestures and wild-eyed terror. Night after night, her late husband's ghost returned to torment her. He appeared at the threshold of her bedroom, his mournful visage illuminated by the pale moonlight seeping through the window. His whispers filled the air like a chilling wind, recounting the love they once shared and the betrayal that had torn them apart. "You cannot escape me," he would whisper, his voice echoing through the walls of her soul. "I will haunt you until the end of your days." Sleep soon became a distant memory for Amanda. Each night, she lay awake in dread anticipation of her late husband's ghostly visitations. Shadows danced across her walls, morphing into grotesque shapes that mirrored the torment of her mind. She grew pale and gaunt, her once vibrant beauty now marred by dark circles under haunted eyes. In her desperation, she sought solace in prayers and offerings, hoping to appease her late husband's restless spirit. But his ghost remained relentless, refusing to let her sleep peacefully or find refuge from his spectral presence. The villagers began to whisper of Amanda's plight, a once proud woman reduced to a trembling shadow of her former self. Some pitied her, while others whispered that she had brought this upon herself with her greed and betrayal. Regardless of their opinions, all could sense the palpable fear that emanated from her haunted existence. One evening, as dusk descended upon Bello, Amanda ventured into the village square to confront her late husband's ghost once and for all. The air was thick with anticipation as villagers watched from a distance, their murmurs of concern mingling with curiosity. Suddenly, his ghost materialized before Amanda, his form shimmering with an ethereal light that cast eerie shadows around them. His eyes bore into hers, accusing and sorrowful, as he spoke with a voice that echoed through the village square. "You cannot escape me, Amanda," he intoned, his voice carrying across the gathering crowd. "You will never find peace until you face the truth of what you have done." Amanda trembled, her knees weak beneath the weight of his relentless gaze. "I'm sorry," she sobbed, her voice choked with guilt and fear. "Please, forgive me." But forgiveness was not forthcoming from his ghost. Instead, he haunted her relentlessly, appearing in the quiet hours of the night, the harsh light of day, and even amidst the bustling market square. His presence left her looking like a madwoman, wild-eyed, sleep-deprived, and consumed by the torment of her own making. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Amanda's haunted existence became a cautionary tale whispered among the villagers of Bello. They spoke of a woman haunted by her past, tormented by the ghost of a love betrayed. And though Amanda sought redemption in vain, Obinna's ghost remained a spectre of justice, a reminder that actions have consequences, even beyond the grave. Rich suitors kept coming to ask for Amanda's hand in marriage, lured by her former beauty and the allure of her tragic story. However, each one was met with the unpleasant sight of Amanda, disheveled and tear-streaked, crying and begging for her late husband's spirit to forgive her. Her pleas echoed through the village, a haunting reminder of her betrayal. The suitors, initially enchanted by the tales of her beauty and grace, quickly turned away in disgust and fear. They realized Amanda was a woman who had driven her husband to his death through manipulation and deceit. The villagers shared the sad tale of poor Obinna with the suitors, recounting how his unwavering love and dedication had been repaid with cruelty and lies. As they heard Obinna's tragic story, their hearts sank with sorrow. Many of them visited his grave, apologizing for having shown interest in the woman who had ruined his life. One stormy evening, under the ominous flicker of thunder and lightning, Obinna's ghost appeared to Amanda once more. The storm raged outside their hut, and the cold wind howled through the cracks in the walls. Amanda, huddled in a corner, tried to find some semblance of warmth and comfort. But her late husband's spirit would not allow her any peace. He angrily drew her outside into the pouring rain, his ghostly presence radiating fury. Amanda's heart pounded in her chest as she stumbled through the mud, her breath coming in ragged gasps. He stood before her, his spectral form illuminated by the flashes of lightning. His eyes burned with a cold, relentless anger, and his voice thundered over the storm. You manipulated me, his ghost roared, his voice a mixture of sorrow and rage. You forced me to the city to search for greener pastures for a family that never existed. You ended my father's lineage, leaving me with no child to continue after me because of your lies. Trembling, Amanda admitted the truth in a low, broken voice. I lied, she confessed. I only wanted you to make money for me, to buy me expensive clothes, shoes, and jewelry. I never cared about having a family. Her words hung in the air, swallowed by the storm. Her apologies were sincere, but they did nothing to move her late husband's ghost. His anger was a palpable force, swirling around them like the relentless rain. You took everything from me, you will never find peace. Just as you brought my life to an end, you will live out your days in torment. Amanda watched him speak, her heart breaking under the weight of his words. A surrendering realization tore through her soul. She was trapped, bound to her late husband's angry ghost for eternity. She would never escape the consequences of her actions. Obinna's ghost disappeared into the rain, leaving Amanda alone, drenched and shivering. She collapsed to the ground, crying profusely, her tears mingling with the relentless downpour. She knew she was condemned to a life of sorrow and regret, haunted by the spirit of the man she had wronged so deeply. In the following days, her condition worsened. She wandered the village like a madwoman, muttering to herself and pleading for her late husband's forgiveness. The villagers watched her with a mix of pity and disdain, their whispers following her like a shadow. She deserves it, some said. She brought this upon herself. Others shook their heads in sorrow. What a tragic end, they murmured. Poor Obinna. Amanda's desperation drove her to seek help from the village priest, hoping he could exorcise her late husband's spirit and free her from her torment. The priest, a kind but firm man, listened to her story and agreed to try. They arranged a ritual in the village square, under the watchful eyes of the curious villagers. The ritual began with chants and the burning of incense, the air thick with the scent of herbs and smoke. Amanda knelt in the center, clutching a rosary and praying for deliverance. As the priest chanted, her late husband's ghost appeared, more menacing than ever. You cannot cleanse the guilt from your soul, he intoned, his voice resonating with a chilling finality. You will never find peace. The villagers gasped, some crossing themselves in fear. The priest continued his chants, beads of sweat forming on his brow, but it was clear the ritual was failing. Obinna's ghostly form loomed larger, his presence overwhelming. In a final act of defiance, her late husband's ghost rushed at Amanda, passing through her like an icy wind. She screamed, the cold seeping into her very bones. The villagers watched in horror as Amanda collapsed, writhing on the ground. From that day on, her torment grew even more unbearable. She would see her late husband's ghost at every turn in the marketplace, where he would stand silently watching her, in her hut, where he would sit at the foot of her bed, his eyes burning with accusation, and in her dreams, which had turned into endless nightmares. One night, as Amanda lay in her bed, she felt a cold hand grip her shoulder. She turned, expecting to see her late husband's ghost, but found herself alone. The fear and guilt gnawed at her, driving her to the brink of madness. She could no longer distinguish between reality and the haunting visions that plagued her. The suitors stopped coming. Word of Amanda's madness and the ghost that tormented her spread far and wide. No one wanted to be associated with the woman who had driven her husband to his grave. Amanda was left alone, a pariah in her own village, shunned by the very people she had once tried to impress with her supposed wealth and status. In a desperate bid to escape her torment, she fled to the outskirts of the village, seeking solace in the desolate wilderness. But even there, her late husband's ghost followed her, his relentless presence a constant reminder of her guilt. One stormy night, as lightning cracked across the sky, Amanda found herself on the edge of a cliff, the wind whipping her hair and clothes. She looked out over the dark expanse, her mind a whirlwind of despair and regret. She felt the cold touch of Obinna's ghost behind her, his presence more intense than ever. You cannot escape me, his voice whispered in her ear. You will never find peace. Amanda turned, her eyes wide with terror. Please, Obinna, she begged. Let me go. I can't take this anymore. Her late husband's ghost loomed over her, his eyes filled with a sorrow that cut deeper than any words. You took everything from me, he said, his voice a mixture of anger and sadness. Now, you must live with what you've done. Her knees buckled, and she fell to the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. The storm raged around her, the wind howling and the rain pouring down in torrents. She knew there was no escape from her guilt, no respite from the haunting presence of her late husband's ghost. In the end, she was left a broken shell of her former self. She wandered the wilderness, muttering to herself and pleading for forgiveness from a ghost that would never grant it. Her once vibrant beauty was now a distant memory, her eyes haunted and hollow. The villagers occasionally saw her from afar, a forlorn figure roaming the landscape. They whispered amongst themselves, telling the cautionary tale of Amanda and Obinna, a story of love turned sour by greed and deceit. The memory of Obinna's unwavering love and tragic fate remained a somber reminder of the consequences of one's actions. Amanda's life continued in an unending cycle of torment and regret, forever haunted by the ghost of the husband she had betrayed. She had gained nothing from her selfish desires but had lost everything, condemned to live out her days in the shadows of her past mistakes. The legacy of Obinna's love and sacrifice lived on, a beacon of what true devotion meant, while Amanda's life served as a stark warning to all who heard her tale. The moral lesson of this tale is that true love and devotion should be cherished and reciprocated, not exploited for selfish desires. Amanda's relentless pursuit of wealth and luxury led her to betray her husband Obinna, whose unwavering love and sacrifice deserved better. Her deceit and greed ultimately resulted in her own torment and isolation, serving as a poignant reminder that actions driven by selfishness and dishonesty can have devastating consequences. The story underscores the importance of valuing and nurturing genuine love and commitment, highlighting the inevitable justice that follows when one disregards these virtues. And this brings us to the end of our story. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it so far, please consider subscribing to our channel and leaving us your thoughts. It will serve as an encouragement to us. See you in our next story.